Hello, my wonderful students. Welcome to Special Topics in Language Studies, the Digital Culture, Media and Language Use class, which you've all been enjoying, I hope, so far. As you can see, this is a new video and I look a lot older than I did in the previous videos, unfortunately. That's just life. I've got a grey beard and almost white hair now, but I hopefully have got better at making videos, so I hope you enjoy this one. Strap in for today's topic. So today we're talking about fake news, misinformation and disinformation, but actually there's also a third type of information we'll be talking about as well. It's not actually that helpful to talk about fake news for several reasons. One, fake news is a very emotive term. If you call something fake news, it doesn't necessarily explain what kind of news it is or what the problem is. So we need more detail about what exactly makes something fake news and what exactly fake news is. So in today's lecture, we're going to examine how information shapes our narratives of experience and what are the motivations behind fake news. So we won't get into the motivations that much in this lecture, but we'll be discussing it in the forum. Okay, so as I said, fake news is not a very helpful expression. We tend to try to break this topic down into three types of bad information. So there's misinformation, there's disinformation, and there's malinformation. Now just pause the video and see if you can decide which is which, A, B, C, which is misinformation, which is disinformation, and which is malinformation. One type of information is accidentally spread. One type of information is deliberately spread, and the third one, which is slightly more difficult to wrap our heads around, but basically it could actually be true information. It might even not be false. It's true information, but presented in a bad way to spread or cause harm. And we'll actually show some examples of this later. Okay, so can you match them up? Yeah, I didn't actually mix them. So what you're looking at there is already the correct answers. Ha, sorry. So here's something from a paper published by MIT Press. So disinformation is false and misleading information that's deliberately spread. So deliberate. Misinformation is false and misleading information that's inadvertently spread. Misinformation, mistake. So deliberate, mistake. Malinformation, information with a basis in reality. So it could even be true, but it's specifically spread to cause harm. So we just want to hurt someone with this information, whether it's true or not. Again, I'll show you some examples of this later on. Here's another useful Venn diagram that I took from the internet. Sorry, no source for this information, so you can't be sure whether it's actually true. But there's obviously some overlap between these categories, and so you can't always say one is one and not the other. Sometimes information might blur those different types of misinformation, mistakenly spread, disinformation, deliberately spread, malinformation, caused to spread harm. We, as you can see, differentiate the type of information based on its intent, or perhaps it's the result as well. So some examples. You may have heard the hilarious story that once upon a time in Paris, Charlie Chaplin thought it would be quite funny to enter a Charlie Chaplin lookalike contest. So he walked in. He didn't tell anyone who he was. He just walked in looking like Charlie Chaplin. But he wasn't dressed like Charlie Chaplin. Or maybe he was. I don't know. Charlie Chaplin will wear whatever clothes he wants. Anyway, he walks into this Charlie Chaplin lookalike contest in Paris, enters the contest, but the judges didn't think he looked as much like himself as someone else. So he only came third in the lookalike contest. Now, obviously, that's a funny story, and if you search on the internet, you can find that widely repeated everywhere. It's a famous anecdote about Chaplin. But as far as we know, it might never have happened. We don't know it definitely didn't happen, but we also know it might not have happened. There's no proof either way, so it's an urban myth. Now, it's not a damaging story, it's not really fake news or anything, but it's one of those stories where it's hard to actually verify, and yet it doesn't matter because the power of the story itself means that it's worth spreading. So people tell the story even though they know it's not true. You might be familiar with this good old quote from Abraham Lincoln. Don't believe everything you read on the internet just because there's a picture with a quote next to it. I don't need to tell you that that's fake as well. However, as you know from my lesson on authenticity, there was a few people who were fooled by this, and one person was fooled because they saw it hanging in their public library. Context is very important for information and for news. It's vital, in fact, to understand the context. So the purpose of this Abraham Lincoln quote is just to show you to use your critical thinking skills whenever you read something. But because somebody saw it in a library, they believed it and thought that it was real, even though it couldn't possibly be real because of the internet not having been invented till much later after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. So I wrote a book about authenticity, which was published in 2016, and it was all about reconceptualizing authenticity for English as a global language. Now, when I wrote the book, it goes through review, and the reviewer said, yes, great book, fantastic book, but you should be quoting more Hegel. And I was like, Hegel? Never heard of Hegel. I studied art and literature and linguistics, not German philosophy. But it turns out Hegel was a good person for me to look into because Hegel, one of his most famous arguments, and this is a bit of an oversimplification of his argument because he never actually said the words, but Hegel is famous for promoting this concept that truth is a process. So he didn't actually say truth is a process. That's not a direct quote, but this is a nice sort of simplification of his idea about how we come at an understanding of what the truth is. A lot of people think that truth is true or false, like 1 or 0, yes or no, it's either true or it's not true. But Hegel wanted us to think of truth more as like a jigsaw piece. So when you get one piece of a jigsaw puzzle, you only have that one piece, and it's not enough to really understand what you've got, you know. The little pieces of a jigsaw come together to build a bigger picture. If you've just got one piece, you don't have the truth, you don't have the full picture, you just have a piece of it. And the process is all about fitting it together with other pieces until you build up a larger contextual understanding and you can see the whole picture. So in that way, for Hegel, truth is a process. It's about building up an understanding situated in context and looking at the larger whole rather than just claiming this is the truth. It's more of a process of coming to an understanding by collecting data and evidence. It's a great concept, I think. It's especially important in today's world when you consider just how much English dominates the world of science, which obviously is the world of our knowledge, the world of our understanding. So some estimates have claimed that as much as 98% of the world's scientific research is published in English, but only 18% of the world's population actually speaks it. Okay, so in this lecture, we want to talk about these questions. First, what is fake news? We've looked at the three types of information: disinformation, misinformation, malinformation. Next, we want to talk about how fake news spreads and why fake news is a problem. Now, for the next two sections, I'm going to show you a video, which is, the link is on the course page. And I just want you to pause the video and watch these two alternative videos before we carry on. I don't want to put the video in my video, otherwise it will get taken down for copyright on YouTube, etc. So this first video is with Dr. Philip Sargent, who is a bit of a hero of mine. He works at the Open University in the UK, and he's been analysing the language of fake news. This video is from TED Ed, and this is a fantastic, very short 3-minute video that I would like you to watch, which talks about how fake news spreads. It gives you some great examples, like the example of vaccines and autism. And it also gives a nice example of a quote from Mark Twain. And the best bit is that it talks about circular reporting. So we'll be talking about circular reporting in our lecture after you watch these two videos. For this one. Okay, if you wanted to do a bit more fun, this is something I'd like you to do, and this will be connected to the research task as well. So first of all, learn what a filter bubble is, because that's some crazy stuff and you're going to want to know what that is. Learn what a filter bubble is. Find some examples. Next, what's cognitive bias and what's confirmation bias? How is it relevant to this discussion of fake news? Learn more about deep fakes. When I first started putting this lesson together and talking about deep fakes, they weren't as well known and they weren't as sophisticated, but today they're much more well known and they're very sophisticated and very interesting. You could also, as a bit of expansion, make your own deep fake, but obviously make sure everyone knows it's a fake on purpose. Another thing I'd like you to research, there's an article in Wired from 2017, so it's a little bit of an older article now, which came out just after Trump was elected president the first time. And this article in Wired explains about the Macedonian fake news factory and why teenagers in Macedonia were working on fake news that was all very pro-Trump. Basically, spoiler alert, they made a lot of money off it. So it wasn't political, it was all financial. They were enjoying making a lot of money from creating websites that attracted people's attention. It didn't matter whether they were true or not. And finally, you can learn about how Russian trolls tried to influence the US presidential elections. Again, look for reliable sources. We're looking for newspapers that you can trust, newspapers that don't have an agenda behind them, and that means basically hardly any newspapers, but you can choose a newspaper that you trust, an outlet that you think is a good source of hard evidence. I tend to use The Guardian from the UK. I also think that the BBC and NHK can still be trusted to some extent, not, once you know how to sort some of the more emotive facts out. Anyway, just choose a good source for your research and try and find out as much as you can about the following things. And we'll be using these in our research task later. Okay, so here's a bit of a quick exercise for you. I'm going to show you two pictures, and I want you to tell me which one is the fake story and which one is the joke story. The first one, the UK government to replace all CCTV cameras in the central London with one giant eye in the sky. 2. You're being watched. There's one CCTV camera for every 32 people in the UK. Which do you think is the fake, jokey one? Okay, you should have been able to instantly recognize that, to be honest. That's pretty obvious, especially if you read it. But other things also. So, for example, the font of the one on the right, it's a Comic Sans font, so it's supposed to be funny. It even says funny story on it. That's like the first words after the title. The share button is more jokey. The whole thing looks a bit less professional, looks more funny. Okay. But if you take the story itself and were to make it look more real, then people might be fooled by this story because there's some basis in truth. The story on the right is satire. It's actually got true facts in it. The new UK government is planning a £300 billion upgrade. This isn't true. However, there were plans at the time to spend money on CCTV camera upgrades. So there was a kernel of truth that had been blown up into satire. As you know from the TED Ed video that we just watched, sometimes something that starts as a joke can later be taken out of context and people believe it and think that it's real. So some of the fake news is misinformation because it was mistakenly spread, it was originated as a joke or something and then got turned into something serious. So this often happens with satire. As you know from our lesson on internet trolls, the person who tweeted this back in 2016, a boy named, I've forgotten his name, Kazuki Sato. Kazuki Sato posted this claiming that there was a lion escaped after the Kumamoto earthquake in 2016. He got arrested for that. He got arrested and it wasted a lot of time and money. The zoo was getting lots of phone calls, so they called the police. And then the police found that it was this guy Sato who had posted a fake joke on Twitter, but people had believed it. Now the problem with this is that, first of all, people were too quick to believe that this was a lie. And if you look closely and if you're familiar with Japan, you can tell that that photo is not taken in Japan. But also, Sato was being a bit silly. I mean, maybe he didn't deserve to get arrested. I don't know. But he should not really have made a joke about that during the time of an earthquake, during the time of a national emergency or a natural disaster. That's not a good time to be making jokes. And there are consequences even for jokes, especially taken out of context. And as you know from the course, context collapse is a serious issue that we've discussed throughout the course. So there's a lot of reasons why Sato's tweet was taken out of context and became misinformation. This is a still from a video I'm going to show you in which former President Barack Obama says that President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Ah! Adverts! Oh my god. Sorry, I had some problems with that last slide because of adverts from YouTube. I really don't like YouTube anymore. So I'll have to put that back in. I'll embed that into the course. Okay, so just have a look for the Barack Obama deep fake where he calls Trump a dipshit. That will be embedded on the course page. Oh, YouTube's adverts are a big problem, man. Anyway, that's what's called a deep fake. And I want you to think, how convincing is the deep fake? Go and watch it now. Now, out of 10, how convincing would you say that was? Quite a few people told me they thought it was like a 7 or an 8. Quite convincing. Now, if it's a 7 or an 8 convincing, then you could infer that perhaps 7 out of 10 people might believe that, especially if it was taken out of context and presented as a real thing. Oh, that's my phone alarm telling me to go jogging. I'm busy, I'm teaching. Okay, sorry, this slide is a bit of a weird one, but never mind. The point is that the Trump deepfake, that the Trump is a dipshit Obama deepfake was created by a student at university with very little resources, using, I think, a fairly easy to use software. Like almost anyone can make deepfakes nowadays. Maybe not quite as sophisticated as that, but as I said, that one was made by a student who did not have a lot of resources at his disposal. And it was made a few years ago now as well. So the thing is, we're living in what's called the post-truth era. What does that mean? What's post-truth? Post-truth refers to a situation in contemporary politics where facts have lost their significance in public discourse. It's characterized by the prioritization of personal beliefs over factual accuracy. Remember the web quest where we talked about confirmation bias and we talked about filter bubbles. This is relevant here. Post-truth politics disregards the importance of truth and instead focuses on appealing to emotions for political gain. And that's an AI-generated definition which is based on the International Encyclopedia of Human Geography. So I just wanted to let you know that that was a AI-generated definition, but I think it's pretty good, pretty accurate, pretty spot on. And it probably reminds you of somebody, right? I'm about to press next, and when I press next, you're going to see someone's face, somebody famous. Whose face do you think you will see when I press next? See if you can guess. Who does this description of post-truth remind you of? Were you right? Of course. Donald Trump is well known for appealing to people's emotions and disregarding facts and denying things. Even when he's been video recorded saying something, he'll happily deny that he ever said that or deny his intention. So people are slippery with words, people are slippery with information, but our own minds are also designed to reject information that we don't like. We'll treat it as if it was an invading virus. Your body has an immune system. White blood cells attack virus or other unwanted invasive cells when you get sick. Like in your mind, though, your psychology has a similar structure that works at the mental level. It's called confirmation bias. If you believe that the world is round, you will look and you will find evidence that the world is round all around you. And anytime you see something that proves that the world is round, you're going to accept it. And if most other people accept it, then that's probably fine. But there are people, supposedly, who think that the Earth is actually flat. Now, I think that that is exaggerated. I don't think there are very many people who truly believe that. I think most of them are trying to troll scientists with this ridiculous belief that the world is flat. But let's take it for a moment that there are some people who genuinely want to believe the Earth is flat. So they will reject any information or evidence or truth that you tell them to show them that the Earth is round and not flat. And they will grab anything they can to help them prove their point that the Earth actually is flat. And because of misinformation, disinformation, there is evidence, or there are things that claim to be evidence for both sides. And actually, interestingly, they're both wrong. The Earth is not flat and the Earth is not round. It's an oblong spheroid. Anyway, I'm a big fan of Indiana Jones. Who wouldn't be? And as you know, the actor who plays Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford, was recently in a new movie called Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, came out last year. Good film, I enjoyed it. Now, Harrison Ford is in his 80s. He's pretty old, but he's looking fantastic there, don't you think? But that's not really Harrison Ford. That's an AI. That's basically a deep fake, but with high technology. When Hollywood gets involved, they can make such a convincing model of Harrison Ford. He was talking and acting and everything. But you kind of wonder, in 50 years from now, Harrison Ford probably won't still be with us, sadly, in 50 years' time. But his image will be, and we might have enough information from his movies to still continue to recreate him, almost like an AI ghost actor. Now, what are the ethics of that? This has been something that's been discussed widely about the advent of AI since it came out. And a final thing about the nature of truth online. I wanted to show you something that I do with my writing workshop class to show why you need to check the original sources and not rely too much on what we call secondary sources. So a secondary source means that this person read book A and they're telling you about what book A is. But you haven't read book A, you've read the secondary source, the book about the book. You see? Secondary source. So if you didn't read the original source, you didn't read book A, but you read a book about book A, you've read a secondary source. And this is a good secondary source, Medical Express. What it does is it aggregates news and research articles from published and verified scientific research, and it turns them into more accessible stories that people can learn from. And it's not fake news, it's not misinformation. Or is it? So I challenge my writing workshop to find the original report. As you can see on this, it's telling about McGill University research that has been done about the use of GPS shrinking the hippocampus, meaning that if you rely too much on, say, Google Maps or your phone, you won't be as good at navigating the real world because that part of your brain shrinks as a result of being underused. Interesting, but can you find the actual reports that make this claim? If you go to the bottom of the comments section on there, there's this very interesting comment at the bottom. It says, "Hello, my name is Rosalind Sham and I work with Dr. Veronique Bobot at the Research Center of the Douglas Institute at McGill University. We appreciate your interest in our research. However, Dr. Bobot never did research on the use or non-use of GPS. If you need more explanations, you're welcome to take a look at the press release on our website," and there's the link. And I followed the link. No mention of GPS. I googled Dr. Bobot. Her other work confirms it. She's looking at grey matter differences, navigational tasks, sometimes with people suffering from Alzheimer's disease. She's a very gifted researcher, but at the time she was not doing any research on GPS. Whoa, no. Did you hear that? Google's listening to me. I did not touch my phone and it just started to tell me about Dr. Bobot. Mm. I was talking Google. I'm trying to teach a lesson. Sorry about that. Anyway, so yeah, I checked it up. This is what you've got to do. Even if you think it looks like a reliable source, you've got to check it. You've got to go to the original source. And I couldn't find the original source. I found the original author and I couldn't find the source. So that means it doesn't exist. Or does it? The plot thickens. Look at this. Her recent publications from 2020, she's actually looking at how the habitual use of GPS negatively impacts spatial memory during guided navigation. Falsehood becomes truth. So they said she was researching GPS. She wasn't. But by the time I got there and checked it, she was. And this was published in Nature, which is the most influential scientific journal on the planet at the moment, as far as I'm aware. Now, what do you think of that, Hegel? Is that truth a process enough for you? That's a crazy process of truth, right? I love that example. We've got other things coming as well, fake news being generated by AI, but also AI having hallucinations because it's trained on such a large database that of course it will have hallucinations because some of its data will not be the same as the data that there'll be different facts in the data. You know, if there's an inconsistency in its training data, it's going to start hallucinating. I already mentioned this about the increase of AI generated fake news, but let's remember this is not because of AI. This is not caused by AI. This is not the fault of technology. This is what Van Dyck calls the amplifying effect. We are not going to fall into the trap of technological determinism and blame the technology. No, we're going to acknowledge that the technology is having an amplifying effect. It's making the thing happen faster and bigger, but it's not the technology's fault. Finally, we're going to talk about malinformation because this is interesting and it requires a little bit of skills within discourse analysis. You're really looking for lies within truth in some ways, or the way that information is misrepresented to cause harm. And here's an example. Now, I'm very sorry. I need to find the person who shared this. So I got this from Reddit, and Linguist had shared these two images, and it really surprised me. So I'm sorry that I haven't credited the person who found these images for me, but I will add it into the description when I can check that. But anyway, so this is the Daily Mirror, a British newspaper, not one I personally read for reasons that you will see very soon. But this is a horrible news story about an ISIS maniac who kills 50 in a gay club. This horrible person was in New York. He didn't like gay people, so he went into a nightclub and just started shooting them, innocent people having a good time. He gunned them down with a machine gun, and they said it was one of the worst US terror attacks since 9/11. He killed 50 people. So that is a horrible story. But let's look at the story as from a linguistic point of view. What's the ratio of positive to negative words on here? What's the focus of the text? What's the image choice? Can you see any other features about this that are strange or unusual? Probably the answer is no, right? I mean, this just looks like it's a horrible story, but it just looks like a normal newspaper. What's wrong with that? Wouldn't really see anything special there. Let's try another example. Very similar case. This person didn't like Muslim people and decided to go to a mosque where innocent people were at prayer, and he opened fire with his machine gun and he killed 49 people, innocent people murdered in a very similar type of attack. Okay? Now, what's the difference between the way these stories are reported? This is an angelic boy who grew into a far-right evil mass killer. But look, he used to be so cute with this little baby with blonde hair, but he turned into this guy here in the little circle in the middle next to the words far right. There's a circle of the killer as he looks now with a shaved head. He looks like a neo-Nazi. But look, he used to be a cute little baby. What went wrong? Society failed him. Where's the mention of terrorism? Why is the font all gentle? Why is the focus on his backstory? When you compare these two almost identical crimes back to back from the same newspaper, you can see that different people are getting treated in a different way when they come through this newspaper. They're putting a filter onto it. And what is the filter? The filter is this type of person is dangerous. This type of person becomes dangerous, but it's not really their fault. They used to be so cute. Basically, the white person gets a much preferential treatment by the newspaper. They're given backstory. They're not shouted at. The choice of image is completely insane. What's going on here? This is so racist. The way that this newspaper is presenting these two stories is so racist. But it's the worst type of racism that you could barely even notice unless your eyes are wide open and you're ready to analyze it. And we got lucky when somebody shared this on Reddit and brought it to our attention. And I will make sure I credit that person in the description of the video. So in previous lectures, we were talking about trolling and the psychology of trolling. We know that trolls enjoy causing as much pain as possible, but unfortunately newspapers also are more likely to sell more copies if they have the most gruesome, horrible stories on the front. If someone's been murdered, that goes to page 1. If someone's been saved, but then someone else gets murdered, the murder will trump the happy story because of the way that that kind of reporting is sensationalized. As a result of the sensationalist reporting, we tend to report on people like trolls, people who say bad things, people who are racists, and we make it seem like those racists are so numerous. There are so many of those hateful people out there. But actually the reality is that there are not that many of those hateful people out there, but they're being amplified by the technology, and they're being amplified by the mass media as well. Which is why Whitney Phillips, in her fantastic book about trolls, says that trolls offer an implicit critique of mainstream media and capitalist business practices which profit from disasters and the grief of others. So anyway, there you go. Fake news, misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. What did you learn from today's lecture that you would like to remember in 10 years' time? Probably nothing. Everything will be fake by then, won't it? Maybe it's already fake, who knows? It's a very difficult situation, but it's a fascinating one. And we need to be aware of the spread of fake news so that we can spot it. And critical thinking skills are more vital than ever today. All right, my wonderful viewers and lovely students. Thank you very much for watching today's video lecture. Next week, we'll be talking about digital media and literacies, reading, writing and participation in the digital age, snippet literacy, and the spread of digital devices. So yeah, until I see you again, see you later, alligator. Thanks for watching and goodbye.